Luke chapter 1, Structural Inversions, Radical Songs. The hum of the early evening traffic outside the brick walls of the church annex faded into a gentle backdrop as the women gathered around the long cedar table in the library. Open notebooks, highlighters, and several parallel Bibles flanked a tray of cooling teacups. Ruth smoothed the pages of her well-worn leather Bible, looking across at the mixed ages of women sitting within the warm, low light of the room. "Let's begin by noticing how this gospel opens," Ruth said, her voice carrying the slow, deliberate pacing of a woman who had spent 40 years tracing these paths. Most of us jump straight into the stable, but Luke doesn't start with a young mother in Bethlehem. He starts in the high center of religious power, inside the temple sanctuary, with an old couple who have been left entirely behind by a silent calendar. Carissa adjusted her tablet, her fingers tapping the screen to bring up the interlinear Greek layout of the opening prologue. "And look at how he writes that transition, because our English translations flatten the absolute brilliance of it," she said, leaning forward with the intense energy of an anthropologist who had spent years digging through the dust of first-century manuscripts. The first 4 verses are written in an exceptionally elegant, hyper-formal, standard classical Attic style. It's the language of the elite Roman administration, designed to prove to a high-ranking official like Theophilus that this investigation can withstand the highest legal and literary scrutiny. But the exact second the scene shifts to Judea in verse 5, Luke drops the high classical mask. He plunges abruptly into a heavy, deeply Semitic Septuagintal Greek that reads like a word-for-word translation of ancient Hebrew. With that single linguistic shift, he's telling the Roman world that while his grammar is flawless, the story he's about to record belongs exclusively to the covenants, the dust, and the temple liturgies of Israel. Evelyn leaned in, her analytical eyes scanning the passage as she cross-examined the text with a legal focus. That shift changes how we have to read the encounter with Zacharias inside the holy place. He is a seasoned priest, standing at the altar of incense during the crowning moment of his entire career, a lottery system he won perhaps once in a lifetime. And yet when the angel Gabriel breaks the centuries of silence, Zacharias demands a legal sign. He asks, "How shall I know this? For I am an old man." His posture isn't just a casual doubt. It's a professional skepticism that demands a physical proof point, because his long career has systematically numbed him to the possibility of an actual divine intervention. And that's why he's struck mute. The silence imposed on him isn't just a punishment. It's a mandatory structural extraction of his pride. He spent his life speaking words in an empty sanctuary, so God locks his jaw until his heart can catch up with the promise. "But contrast that with Mary," Chloe interrupted, her voice raw with the immediate realism of a university student looking past the stained glass imagery. "We're talking about a girl who was 13 or 14 years old, living in rural Galilee, where a typical wedding was between what we today would call children. When Gabriel arrives in Nazareth, she doesn't stand inside a golden sanctuary. She is an adolescent girl in a peasant village, and the announcement of a pregnancy outside the formal marital window carried severe, potentially fatal legal and social consequences in a high-alert honor-shame culture. Yet her question isn't a demand for proof. She asks, "How will this be since I am a virgin?" She accepts that of the promise. She's simply asking for the operational method of how an unprecedented virgin conception is structurally possible. Her baseline is absolute surrender. When she uses that rare Greek optative mood in verse 38, genoito, "Let it be to me according to your word," she isn't being a passive, helpless child. That is a staggering exercise of conscious personal volition and mature courage that completely shatters the religious establishment. Sarah watched the steam rise from her mug, her mind tracking the deep biological and emotional reality of what followed. "It explains why she fled," she murmured, tracing the geographical lines on the map at the back of her Bible. She didn't just take a casual family vacation to the hill country of Judea. She was a pregnant teenager who had to escape her village to find immediate shelter, physical protection, and emotional validation. And where does she find it? In the domestic sanctuary of Elizabeth's home. The moment Mary's greeting hits the room, the text says the fetus leaps in Elizabeth's womb, and the older woman is instantly filled with the Holy Spirit. Think about the psychological beauty of that moment. The elderly woman whose barrenness had been a source of public shame for decades becomes the ultimate safe haven for the young girl whose pregnancy brings the threat of public scandal. They didn't need a temple or a council of priests to validate them. They found the fulfillment of the kingdom in a private kitchen, hidden away from the empire. Hannah leaned back into the soft cushions of her chair, her expression softening as she brought the discussion down to the corporate weight of the congregation. "That's the heart of the matter for us as a church," she said, looking around the circle of women. "Well-grounded individuals aren't built by cold academic lectures or isolated moral formulas. They are built when we allow these deep, visceral human realities to break through our modern assumptions. Look at Mary's song, the Magnificat. It's an intense model of socio-economic and political inversion, scattering the proud, bringing down rulers from their thrones, and sending the rich away empty while filling the hungry with good things. It matches the Benedictus of Zechariah, which functions like a formal covenantal brief logging the fulfillment of the Davidic and Abrahamic oaths. These two songs are the twin load-bearing pillars of our faith. One represents systemic inversion, and the other represents covenant stability. When our younger generation can look at an older leader like Ruth and find that same vertical continuity, and when our older generation can look at the raw, volatile courage of the younger women and validate it without judgment, the church is no longer an empty institution. It becomes a living temple where the silence is broken, and the sovereign dawn finally breaks through the darkness.